Hello and welcome to the Sonic Cinema podcast. My name is Brian Scuttle. Thank you for joining me at www.sonic-cinema.com, as well as the Sonic Cinema podcast YouTube channel. Check us out at patreon.com/Sonic Cinema as well, where you'll get brief write-ups on older movies that I see, deep dives into the films of Clive Barker, as well as the Jackie Chan Police Story series, among other things, and that is at patreon.com/Sonic Cinema. So last year I started an ambitious deep dive into the class of 1999 movies, and there were still a few movies that I hadn't quite had the time to get to due to time constraints and just how ambitious the entire project was. Doing essentially one movie an episode that took a lot of time as far as me between reviewing modern day movies as well as going back to older movies as well. And we're going to catch up with one of those movies, and it's one that I'm looking forward to talking about because it is a movie I hadn't seen since 1999, and it was great to go back and revisit it. It is Doug Liman's Go, and joining me to talk about that is filmmaker Jakob Bilinski. Thank you very much for joining me, Jakob.
Hey, Brian, thanks for having me again. Always a pleasure to talk cinema with a fellow cinephile.
So, one of the things that distinguished the class of 1999 most was the way that different directors and writers uh, messed with time and the editing process when it comes to telling their stories. Sometimes telling them in more sprawling, uh, epic manner, like in Paul Thomas Anderson's Magnolia, which Jakob and I talked about, or something along the lines of a Mobius strip type first person uh, narrative that kind of plays with our nature of reality, like Fight Club, which is the other one Jakob and I talked about. Doug Liman's Go fits within that same parameters, and I'm looking forward to talking about it. Jakob, what was your first experience with Go?
I remember I was a senior in high school when this movie came out. Zero graduated, and they had I don't remember what it was, what I read about it in, probably in Entertainment Weekly or something. But I remember there was this whole thing of like these. I, I don't remember if it was they were talking about like Sundance movies or whatever, but it was like upcoming little kind of indie, but not really indie movies. I mean, I know that
Mm-hmm.
this was like a Columbia film, but it was kind of considered more of like a on the fringe type film. And it said keep an eye out for Go, this new movie directed by Doug Liman, who from the director of Swingers, and it's sort of like a dark comedy in the vein of Pulp Fiction was how they managed they
Mm-hmm.
put it forward. And it was just like it was this one still shot of Katie Holmes and Sarah Polley like in a grocery store like tagging merchandise or something. It was like a promo pic, and then I was thinking, okay, and they're like it's a series of vignettes and stories set on New Year's, and I was like, hey, I like Swingers, sure, I'll go see that. So I went to the theater to check it out, and honestly, kind of was blown away. I would say I really like Go. I was obsessed with it for a hot minute, for a few years after it came out. It was one of those that I would just watch over and over, and like
Mm-hmm.
friends would come over. I would show it to them, and I hadn't seen it in. Well, that's kind of ahead of the time. I'll pause on that. But like I remember like really being taken with it. Like I like it tonally, artistically, it felt at the time in 1999 like it was kind of tailor made for me.
Yeah.
And I know you were talking about like all the films that you're doing in this class of 99, which of course you were behind because too many amazing movies came out that year. So how could you possibly deal with them all? Every time I'm like, oh, what year did that come out? I always forget. I'm like, oh yeah, Go was 1999 too, because you think, oh, okay, well you got The Matrix and Magnolia and like all the and Fight Club and all the ones we talked about, but it's like there are too many. And
Yeah.
Go was this little dark, like like enigmatic film with teeth that just kind of caught me off guard. And
Mm-hmm.
it's so simple because it's one of those, like, I know it's like if you go searching for it, you type in Go, like on IMDb or Blu-ray.com or anything, it's always like near the bottom of the list because it's such a like an omnipresent word in
Yeah.
every title. It's like it's not really on the top of lists when you look for it, and so it's easy. I think a lot of people forget about it, but it really, I I felt like if no one else liked that movie when it came out, I felt like it was made for me, and
Yeah.
that felt kind of special in a way. I sort of affectionately used to refer to it as like the Costco Pulp Fiction because it felt like a less prestigious version of that same type of storytelling
Hmm.
technique. But that's not fair because I mean, I think the performances are great. John August's script is like razor sharp, and
Yeah.
Doug Liman pulling double duty as director and his own DP like does some pretty amazing
Hmm.
work with like how he portrays and tells the story in this. Like, and I'm really fond of it. I viewed it last night in preparation for this, and I hadn't seen it in I couldn't tell you how many years.
Yeah.
I'm like I'm thinking it's probably been like a decade. I don't know. Like I love the movie. I just hadn't revisited it in a
Hmm.
very very long time. But it came flooding back, man. And honestly, rewatching it was almost like looking through a yearbook. It was very I got very nostalgic
Hmm.
and forgot how much I love this movie. So yeah, it was I was pretty taken with it from the get go. I guess is what my ultimate point is. How
Yeah.
about you?
No, and I really enjoyed it. And when it's funny because of the fact that in and yeah, the Pulp Fiction comparison I think is pretty easy to make with this one because of the fact that it all I mean it's a tweak on the Pulp Fiction type of narrative because of the
Hmm.
fact that John August's story essentially starts with this this one scene in a break room at a grocery store, and
Hmm.
it each story sort of branches off by there, looking basically following a different character that's in that break room at that time, and it's funny because of the fact that it's in addition to there were a couple of different trends in addition to 1999 having all of these different narrative tricks uh, coming out in movies. You also had a bit of a teen movie boom at the time and
Oh
teen
yeah.
comedies. And it's like when I watched this movie a few days ago,
You mean like the
this
10 things I hate about you and the she's all that's and all that?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's like this one feels like this is sort of that genre's Pulp Fiction. Like somebody kind of had to make a Pulp Fiction for the teen set, and it's like this is kind
Yeah.
of it. I
Where,
mean,
it,
it's
where
not.
it's like grimy and dirty.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a dark comedy and it's about crime, but it still has that structure in the Pulp Fiction vein, and I think that's one of the things that's so entertaining about it. And it's essentially a series of three stories, each told more or less from a different point of view, and all coming off from this one scene at grocery store break room with Sarah Polly, Katie Holmes, and Desmond Askew, who plays Simon. And to so going into Doug Liman for a bit, I absolutely love Swingers. I
Hmm.
love Swingers. I haven't seen it in a while, so I kind of want to revisit it.
Yeah.
But I love Swingers at the time. So from the director of Swingers, hey, I'll be interested in this, and I really was. I really enjoyed it. Um, and the thing is interesting because of the fact that like Swingers was basically about um, it was sort of about late 20s, early 30s uh, culture in Los Angeles. This one is sort of like late teens, early 20s in a
Yeah.
way, and so it's a little bit younger, but it's one of those things where it's like it's a crime comedy, but at the same time, like crime almost happens sort of accidentally for these people in a way,
Hmm.
and for because of circumstance, and so
Yeah. The whole movie, like if we're gonna go with the Pulp Fiction vibe, it's like the whole movie, like the way that crime and circumstance happens. It's like a series of vignettes that are like in the vein of that moment in Pulp Fiction of, oh, I just shot Marvin in the face, where it just sort of happens. And like I kind of like it because it is blisteringly funny
Yeah.
oftentimes, but it also gets unexpectedly dark, kind of out of left field. Like there's a few moments I'm like, oh, I forgot how uncomfortable part of this is. Like I remember thinking it was like very kind of like gritty and lean and mean and not like it didn't kind of go out of its way to make things glamorous, like you said, a lot of the teen movies did at that time. And it's like, while I like here in the Midwest can't necessarily say like I relate to like the party culture of, you know, what is glamorized here or what is portrayed here in like LA at the time. Like, you know, I did kind of like remember what that felt like. I mean, I was at that time of like, you know, that age of, you know, like, oh, I kind of want to go out and get into some shit and like, you know, party with my friends and like, you know, have a wild night. And this, like you said, this movie is essentially three stories over one wild night that happen concurrently that all lead up to the next day. Like, but we get to see like, you know, oh, this happened while this was happening with so and so. Okay, this happened with Simon. Well, this is happening with Rana, and vice versa. And I know we'll get to the characters in a little bit, but like I remember thinking that felt kind of like unique. I mean, like, yeah, I was like, oh, you can make the Pulp Fiction correlation, but it's really just because it's told out of order, which is nonlinear storytelling. Which you know, we always say Pulp Fiction. It's like, well, he did the same thing in Reservoir Dogs, so it's like, is that a Tarantino thing? That's just a storytelling thing. It's like, well, then Nolan did that in Memento like a year later. You know, it's just fucking with chronology. That's all it is. But but it worked really well here because like some of the moments where you get to see like not to jump ahead, but for instance, like you get to see Todd Gaines, played by Timothy Olyphant, who's like, okay, I'm gonna be honest, this is my favorite Timothy Olyphant performance. Like it's cards on the table. He just oozes cool from the moment you see him. I really want to show this movie to my mom. It wouldn't be the most comfortable thing to watch with her, but like, you know, she has the biggest crush. Sorry, mom, if you're listening. She has the biggest crush on Timothy Olyphant. Like, because I was like, you should check out Justified, and she got hooked on that show. And I was like, you want to see one of his earlier films? Because everybody's like, oh, Timothy Olyphant, Justified. I'm like, you mean Timothy Olyphant who was in Go? Yeah. Every time like I'm like, this is the movie I tie him to. Yeah. Because I just thought he was the coolest son of a bitch I'd seen in a movie at that point, outside of something in a Tarantino movie. But anyway, the point is like you have Todd Gaines' character having this conversation on a phone, and then you see Simon, who's on the other line with, and his story later. And there's all these little moments where you have to remember, oh, this is referred to there. And like I remember like just really, because I was sold on the characters. It is like if you don't buy into the characters, because it is ultimately just a character piece. Like if you're not on board with the characters' plights, then you're not going to give a shit about the movie. But I totally was in on whatever was going to happen to all these players, and as the story played out. And I think that it just like there was something about that I can't quite put a finger on that spoke to me. Like it cards on the table. I remember seeing this movie, and this is very early on. Like I had just been making like little shorts with my friends in high school before I was like, hey, Jake wants to be a filmmaker. This was actually pretty formative and influential to me because I remember seeing this movie and thinking, I want to do that. Yeah. I haven't made anything like this. Shia, okay, I wasn't going to talk about this, but like this is how I responded to this movie. I went and made a short film with my friends after I graduated high school before I went to college. And it's a piece of shit, and you'll never see it. No one will ever see it. There's one copy on a VHS buried somewhere in a closet, and it basically ripped off Go. I was like, I want to make a movie like that, so I tried to make like a thing with me and my friends, and we all played ourselves. It sucks, but it was basically just I saw Go, and it hyped me up, and I wanted to do something like that. Like so, like I can't quite put my finger on the pulse of what it is about this movie, but it just oozes cool to me, and it's from the get-go. Like I'm really big on, it's a tiny thing, but like films that creatively play with the opening logo of a studio. Sometimes where you know you have like the music, like the actual track that accompanies a logo, whether it's like in this case Columbia or Lionsgate or something, or you know 20th Century Fox. But then every once in a while you get a film that maybe like adds a different tint to it to put you within the tone of the movie. Like, oh, Okay, like in the Matrix, well, why does the Warner Brothers logo look kind of like a green computer now? Or like, why do you have this score playing when I'm used to hearing the Warner Brothers opening logo? Or in this case, all of a sudden the last note or the note before of the Columbia logo music kicks into the soundtrack of the rave track that kicks in at the beginning of the score, and then like it just gets intercut and you have these flash like interrupting cuts to the end of the logo. And I remember thinking it's like this movie is like interrupting the construct of what how you're expecting, because you're like, you got the logo and then you have the title cards of Columbia Pictures Presents, and it's like this movie is like on drugs. It's so impatient. It has to like cut off the logo. And I remember thinking, it's the simplest thing, but I remember thinking that's the coolest thing I've ever seen at the time. I mean, like, but I like the movie starts off oozing cool, and I don't know, like it for me it holds up. I'm curious to see what it was like for you on a rewatch, but like it does feel like a time capsule. Like there's some things I had trouble with, like narrative wise, like I don't know what it was like at the time, but I remember Sarah Polley's character when I was a teenager thinking, oh man, that sounds like a real plight, because she's freaking out about making rent and getting $380.
Yeah.
And now as an adult, I'm like, what fucking apartment did you have that cost $380 in LA?
Exactly.
But I mean, like that went over my head now. But so like, I don't know if I'm just becoming a bitter old person now, but like it's I didn't catch that at the time. So there's things like that that did not age well, and like the whole techno culture, like before there was dubstep, before there was synthwave, before everything, it was just called techno or EDM. Like, and I remember I'd never been to a party like that, but between movies like this, and then there was that 1-2 punch the next year in like 2000 2001, which I'm a big fan of, but they're kind of like underground hits of Groove and Human Traffic. And I remember between like these three movies thinking, I desperately want to go to a party like that, a rave like that, where like everybody apparently is on ecstasy and they have like the glow light bands around and they're doing like the weird dances. And like, I was never into that culture, but I remember visually thinking that would be really fun to go to and have a wild night and walk away with some stories of, let me tell, like sitting over at a diner, which this movie literally does, at Denny's with friends the next morning. Let me tell you about my crazy night last night. And that's what this movie is. It's like almost like a recounting of like the story of what you're telling your friends hungover at breakfast the next day of, don't tell my parents, but this is what happened. And like, and there's something charming about that, at that whole rite of passage of being like in your late teens, early 20s. And like, I know that sounds weird. Like I never really like experienced that. I mean, like I've had my fair share of wild nights and parties and everything, but like I never have experienced what happened in this movie. But in a weird way, I was always like, that would be a cool story that you would talk about for a while. But the movie, even though it feels dated, still aged okay for me. Like, what was your experience or response to it?
No, I definitely think it remains an entertaining movie. I mean, I was never one of those. I was a pretty boring kid in my teens and 20s. It's like I kind of just stayed to myself, and I mean that's fine. But it's like I never had these. I never really had these instances of like going out and partying and all night and stuff like that. And so I was like a bit older and didn't really have as many. I kind of had to grow into that sort of extroverted personality of that extroverted part of me that would go and enjoy a night out with people and stuff like that.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean this was an entertaining rewatch. I'd forgotten so much of it that, I mean, I think that helped because of the fact that I was basically rewatching it for the first time. And
yeah, no, that's what it felt like for me.
It was great to really sort of dive into the cast and see. It's funny just how much of this cast is very much of the moment. Like you had Katie Holmes, who was Dawson's Creek, Scott Wolf, Jay Moore.
You need to throw disturbing behavior in there. I was really I was into that for a hot minute, but yeah, right there with you.
Yeah, and you just had all these younger actors who were they were sort of on the cusp of, you weren't quite sure how they were going to be, as far as were they going to be lead actors going into movies, were they going to be more character actors and stuff like that. And so you had all of these younger actors, and that's why I kind of put it with those teen comedies at the time, because of the fact that you just had this collection of actors of this particular generation, and it's like this was sort of that part.
It
And
is, and when you're reflecting back, like if you think about that, like what you're talking about, like it really is a pretty stacked cast. I mean, yeah, you
yeah,
got Katie Holmes and Sarah Polley, and then Doug Liman, like you said, but then like of course, yeah, Scott Wolf and Jay Moore, who were really hot at the time. I mean, you had like a little bit of the prestige with like well, Timothy Olyphant, he was still pretty young at that point, but like
yeah,
William Fichtner, I was like, holy shit, William Fichtner, I forgot he was
mhm,
in this. But then you had Taye Diggs, Breckenmeyer, James Duval, who were like the '90s
yeah.
guys. And then I completely forgot that Jane Krakowski and Melissa McCarthy show up
I
randomly in this movie.
yeah, I mean
It's
very
like
early Melissa McCarthy. It's like obviously I wouldn't have necessarily known her from anything. So it's like
I
going back
I
and
did not
knowing what we
catch
know
that
of Melissa
that was her.
McCarthy
I
now, it's like,
was
oh my god, but yeah, I
yeah, when
completely
she
forgot
answered the
Jane
door,
Krakowski was in this movie.
I was like, how did I not remember? I was like, I feel like I should have like first time I saw Melissa McCarthy movie, be like, oh, that was the one dude's sister in Go that answered the
Yeah.
door, and I'm like, I didn't catch that, and I was just like a couple of other movies we talked about. I showed to Emily, my girlfriend, like the first time, her first time seeing this movie, and she's like, holy shit, that's Melissa McCarthy. I'm like, no, it's not. I didn't believe it when she came on screen. I'm like, no, I was like, I can see it kind of looks like her, and I went to IMDb. I'm like, son of a bitch. I had like, it's like she's a baby in this movie. It's
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I mean, like I don't. Yeah, this is before we knew who she was really, or okay, before I knew who she was. Like she
Yeah.
could have done a
Yeah.
thousand things that I just hadn't seen at that point, for all I know. But yeah, no, it's a pretty. You're right. It's very of the moment. It really feels like a time capsule film for me because
Mhm.
it like watching it again, it took me back to high school, and as much as I'm like I say I wanted like a night like that, and sure I've had parties like I've been to. I really kind of am an introvert at heart. I would really rather stay home and watch a movie than go out and do anything.
Yeah.
Definitely now in my life, but back then, like I did kind of have this whole. I think maybe it was because I was on the cusp of realizing I wanted to be a filmmaker and
Mhm.
and like I was like I was writing scripts at that point, but I didn't know what to do, and they're shit. But like there was that whole thing of like if you're wanting to be an artist and a storyteller, you want life experiences so that you can draw from that and tell. That was kind of the appeal. It's not like I really wanted to go to a party and OD or get hit by a car or some of the terrible things that happen in this movie, or end up at a
Yeah.
drug dealer's house where they end in like a standoff, like maybe get shot in the arm, and like have this night in Vegas where you're having to get chased by these mob people. Like I didn't. It wasn't that. It was just the appeal of having like these crazy stories with your friends, and that like
Mhm.
it really feels like sitting like watching this movie now like where I am in my life, it feels like sitting down and having a drink with an old friend and being like, hey, you remember that time that this shit happened, and like
Yeah.
maybe, and then someone tells a story that one ups and you're like, holy shit, that happened. And like it feels like that. It's like kind of like a good buddy movie, like in a weird way, along the lines of like I just love watching these stories play out, and
Yeah.
like I could sit and watch these characters sit and have conversations in the same way that I could like Jackie Brown. Nothing
Yeah.
could happen in that movie, but I just love watching these people talk. You
Yeah.
know?
No, I
Um,
completely get that. And it's like, yeah, you do feel like that. I mean, that's exactly what this feels like. It's a series of stories about crazy nights for these people that yeah, you're going to talk about, the next morning. And that's one of the things that's the appeal of them. And the way they come back and the way they mix and match and come back, and it's absolutely it's really entertaining in that way. So let's go
mhm.
ahead and get started with those stories. And the first one is Rona, the character played by Sarah Polley, and Claire, played by Katie Holmes. Um, they yeah, the main part of this for Polly, or for Rona, is that she needs to make sure she has enough money to cover rent, and she's
Mhm.
not quite there, but she's almost there. And so she takes Simon, the third character in that break room, is wanting to ask her to cover his shift so he can go to Vegas. And we'll get to that. But she agrees, and because she needs the money. And so when she's working his shift, uh, Jay Moore and Scott Wolf, as a couple of actors who both happen to be gay, both happen to be a couple, they come up to her and ask if she has any ecstasy. And, she's like, I mean, she ends up kind of, she ends up kind of lying to him and says, yeah, it's like I can get that. It's like, and they set up time to meet. So her and Claire, they go to Todd, the Timothy Oliphant character's house. They're going to buy some ecstasy. She doesn't have enough money for it. So she basically leaves Claire as collateral so she can go and, she tries to convince Todd that, oh, I'm not gonna sell it. I need 20 tablets. And so it's like, okay. But, he's kind of suspicious on it. Because that's a lot. So uh she goes to Zach and M's house, and William Fischer's there, and we're gonna find out that he's an undercover cop, and he's trying to bust their dealer, and so she ends up flushing the drugs because she's kind of suspicious, and she ends up not getting the money for it, so she ends up getting just over the counter drugs at the drugstore to get back to Todd so they can get Claire back, and that basically leads them to a party where she ends up selling what she has in order to get some money, and Todd comes to realize this, and it's a really wild chase through the party that ends up with Rona in a ditch, and I'm not going to explain how she gets into the ditch.
Yeah,
but
it kind of comes out of you're like, holy
dark,
shit when that happens.
There's a pretty dark ending to the beginning to that first story. It's like, oh my god, I didn't expect.
Yeah, and they just leave that hanging there. I remember being so uncomfortable in the theater because I was like, this movie's fun, and you're like, oh shit, consequence, no.
and Todd's like, I don't know what to do with this situation.
Oh man, I love him in that scene. And for a quick second, like speaking of Todd again, Timothy Oliphant just oozes coolness. Like I was so obsessed with this. I was so obsessed with this character. This is super douchey, but I'll admit, like afterwards, I just kept anytime like if I answered like my phone, I would answer it like him or just speak like whenever like he got a phone call. I was just like, he's the coolest dick ever because he's kind of a scumbag, but like he had that like the dye tattoo, the pair of dye tattooed on his neck, and he's just sitting there, and that girl's leaving his apartment. And he's wearing like a Santa hat. Also, this is always like I love watching. I feel like I kind of want to reincorporate this because I love watching like dark kind of movies that take place on Christmas, which is usually Shane Black fare around Christmas instead of Christmas movies. Like Go is kind of a fun subversive Christmas movie because like they keep embracing the whole time. Hey, this is our Christmas Eve, but it's in LA and you don't see snow, and everybody's like, it's warm weather. So like, when they're driving around in Manny's car and he's got like all the Christmas lights in, where it's like, it's a fun, dirty Christmas movie in a weird way. Yeah. But Oliphant, man, like he's just, some of his dialogue, John August like was like doing the best kind of not Tarantino dialogue, but about as close as you could get, like at the time, like with little things like he's like, well, Rana, like when she goes to buy the pills, he's like, Rana, like if you're asking for a favor, and I don't even do my best friend's favor, and like I give head before I do a favor, so we're not even friends. The chances of you getting a favor from me are pretty fucking slim. I paraphrased and screwed that up, but it's just like it's like where those characters talk in those overly eloquent, overly stylized in the wording type monologues and delivery, where people don't actually talk that way. Only unless you're like in a Tarantino or a Kevin Smith movie, or in this case in a John August script. It's like, but it's cool. You're like, I don't know anyone that talks like that, but please keep talking like that. This just feels like elevated conversation.
The Timothy Oliphant is great in this movie, and he's my next favorite performance in this movie after Sarah Polley.
And Sarah Polley is a phenom in this. Yeah. I feel bad. I don't know if it's that I haven't followed her career more, or if she just didn't do as much, but I remember, and there was that stretch in between, but this and Snyder's Dawn of the Dead remake, I just remember thinking, this woman is amazing, and like I know she's done a bunch of other stuff probably, but I for some reason those are the only two when I'm trying to think of her
Well,
filmography
she's
that come to mind.
really transitioned more into directing, which she's a phenomenal
That's
director.
awesome. Now I need to look
Um,
her up and watch what she's directed.
yeah,
Shame on me. That's
definitely
awesome.
check out Away with Her or Away from Her.
Okay.
It actually won Julie Christie an Oscar that year. It's a phenomenal movie. It's about Julie Christie's
Well,
character has Alzheimer's,
now I have to.
and it's a heartbreaking movie, but it's a brilliant movie. And then she also directed a documentary called uh, Stories We Tell, which about that's
Okay.
more personal about her family. It's tremendous as well. But yeah, she's more transitioned into a directing career over the past
And
decade or so. But yeah,
that's
it's
awesome. I mean,
worth
like honestly, like anything that she's involved in, I
yeah
like just because honestly, just from those two, like I'm a fan. I think she's an amazing talent. So
yeah
yeah,
and
I'm excited to check that out now.
yeah, and before this, she was in The Sweet Hereafter, which was the Amit Goyan movie, just which
Okay.
is another just heart wrenching movie.
I kind of I feel awful that I didn't really like follow more. I remember like
Yeah,
loving her in this and Dawn of the Dead, and it's like she's just one of those performers that I would just like shame on me didn't bother to look up the rest of their work. But
yeah.
yeah, I
No,
honestly just off of this alone, I think she's amazing.
yeah, she's definitely worth following, both as an actor and as a director. But yeah, she's
Awesome.
really great. And there's in Sweet Hereafter, she has a maturity to her that is really sort of beyond her years in that movie. And the thing that I like in this movie is that it this movie sort of builds on that and turns it into a really uh, sharp degree of confidence in the character. And like she has a feel bit of anxiety about everything that she's doing and everything she's going through, but she's very confident when she's dealing with Todd, and she's very confident dealing with Am and Zach, and she just
Hmm.
really knows how to uh, she really knows how to play things up for the people that she needs to play things up for in this movie.
Oh yeah, just like a tiny simple thing that I really love, like the way that she does that scene where she goes with Adam and Zach and William Fichtner's character. Whenever like she goes over there and she catches a whiff that hey, this feels weird. He's like, can we make a deal? And then she's like, hmm. She can tell that they're cops, flushes the drugs, and then he's trying to be like, I just want to make a deal. Can we make a deal? And she's like,
Mm-hmm.
no, I couldn't get anything. Hmm.
Yeah.
I guess I probably shouldn't be drinking this beer, should I? Considering I'm so underage and all, and then
Yeah.
just makes dead eye contact while she chugs it. And it's so
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Like she's just a really like really cool character, and her
Yeah.
performance I think is pretty phenomenal in this.
Yeah, and she just has really great chemistry with Katie Holmes, and I think
Yes.
this is one of the strongest performances I think Katie Holmes has given in a movie. I
Oh,
think she's really good in this.
I'll agree. And I'll admit, back when this came out, old high school Jake had one of the biggest crushes on Katie Holmes. Between this and I hadn't seen Dawson's Creek, but between this and Disturbing Behavior, I was like, hey, you before Tom Cruise ruins things. Anyway, but yeah, no, like yeah, she was kind of. I think this is definitely a high point for her. I thought she was pretty great.
Yeah.
And I love it. Like she kind of like she essentially sort of bookends and streams the stories together because she kind of
Mhm.
bookends the movie. Like really, she's not like it's Rana and then Simon and then Adam and Zach. Those are the three main title card vignettes, right? Like she doesn't even get we don't even get a full story of her, but she kind of is in a weird way the heart that ties a lot of the stuff together. And I think that they for a character that isn't like a main title card character, she has a lot to do and carries a lot of weight. And I think that yeah, no, she sells it. She's got a certain charisma and charm about her in this movie in particular that works just really really well.
Yeah.
Like especially like all the interaction with her and Timothy Oliphant. Like I thought like that opening diner scene where you're like, hey, who's this person? Who's she talking to? And where that goes at the end
Yeah.
and where it ends up is just it's really really enigmatic. Yeah, man, this movie just has kind of a strange charm to it, and we've kind of, well, it comes out. Okay, we'll talk about this because I want to talk specifically about William Fichtner, but that's more as an Adam and Zach story. So right now you were just on Rana's tale. To go back to your the outline of the narrative.
Yeah. So 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 after we see Rona in the ditch and she is left in the ditch, pretty somewhat bleak ending for the end of the movie, but for the end of that part of the movie, but it still has a degree of humor because Todd is like, what do I do in this situation? Like he really does not know what to do in that situation. We return to the break room scene and we follow Simon when he goes to Vegas with Breckenmeyer, Tay Diggs, and those guys for a night of debauchery. And that is it. And thinking about that sequence, it's sort of a condensed version of The Hangover. And
it really is
because of how
when The Hangover came out, I remember thinking this is like the middle story in Go. Yeah.
But it follows Simon, and it's funny because of the fact that like Breckenmeyer and who's the other character in this?
You got Breckenmeyer, James Duvall, and Tay Diggs.
James Duvall. Yeah, those guys are sidelined for most of the episode because of the fact that they had too much shrimp at the buffet, which
it is hilarious. I'm honestly, like, anytime I've gone to like a buffet where it's like a discount cheap buffet, I've been afraid to eat shrimp since I saw this movie. I was like, I don't want to end up like that.
So Tay Diggs' character and Simon, Marcus and Simon, they go down, and Tay Diggs goes to play blackjack, and Simon's like, "Oh, give me, I need my money to play," and he doesn't get his money, so he basically crashes this wedding that's there, and he proceeds to have a threesome with two of the bridesmaids, and it's funny because it also brings in this crazy discussion that they had on the trip up about tantric sex. And
the payoff of that joke
so
kills me. Tantra, baby. Like that shit's so good. And I love that it's like, okay, we're gonna have this sequence and the sex scene is so hot that it sets the room on fire. Yeah. Metaphor and pun intended. It's so great.
And like he's I can't remember, but it's like he's so euphoric over the experience that it's like he just almost can't believe it, and he just runs out of the room. And
no, he looks over like she's on top of him. The one girl's my favorite thing is like, and I love that brings in one of the times they keep using the title of the movie, like, because they're like, like, I love all the times that they use Go, because I was like, why is this movie called Go at first? But it's like when they're like trying to outrun the back, and they're like, go, 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 and they keep screaming it over and over. You're like, okay, this is like, okay, cool. So the title literally is calling to a sense of immediacy. But then they kept referring to like anytime like you come or ejaculate as like going, because the girl's like, did you go? And he's like, no. So then they do that, like they refer to that like 2 or 3 times, like you didn't go once. So it's like, okay, so it's kind of a dirty joke is the title, but it's but I love that because like she says like, did you go? And he's like, no, why not? Tantra, baby. Cuts and the sex is still going, but off frame the other girl is asleep, which I find hilarious because now the curtain is on fire, which the whole setup of this is they went to go smoke weed in the hotel room, and the one girl, she can't hold it in, so she wads these tissues up her nose to hold it in, and then accidentally sets them on fire and blows it out, and then they start kissing, and but one of the tissues wasn't out, and it re-sparks and catches the curtains on fire. But so at this point, the sex is continuing. The one girl's on top of Simon, and the other girl, bridesmaid, is passed out. And then the curtains are on fire. And he just is sort of like looks over at him, smiling. Hey, the room's on fire. And he looks back at the girl, and then the alarm goes off. And then it's like, oh, shit. And yes, grabs his clothes, runs out bare ass naked. Yeah. And then, we're like, hang on, we got to go. And he meets up with, I love the recurring joke with Taye Diggs' character Marcus, where he's wearing that yellow jacket,
yellow blazer, and everybody thinks he works at the hotel.
Yeah. And the one dude in the bathroom gives him money. He's like, "Could you pass me a towel?" And he thinks he's like, "I'm not a bathroom attendant." And then the one dude, this sleazy Guido son of a bitch, like comes up in a sports car and tosses him the keys. He's like, "There's an extra 10 in it for you if you keep it close." And it's like, he goes, "Get in the car." So then they steal a car. So it's like this night keeps like stacking and escalating from threesome burning down a hotel, like fire sex, to stealing a car, to then we move to the strip club. And then the Crazy Horse. And I love Taye Diggs' whole speech. I think is like, "Whatever you do not order champagne." You can't. Or he's like, "You can order any drink." He's like, "Well, what's vodka?" "Vodka is vodka, but don't order champagne. It's a lap dance. You can't afford it." They're in there all of 5 seconds, and the strippers come to him. And Simon, just with his dumbass, "I'd like to buy your most expensive bottle of champagne." So then we move back to the back room again, because this night has to keep escalating. And the lap dance does not quite go as planned.
Obviously
very
Simon does the one thing you're not supposed to do.
Exactly. And important plot point that we need to mention here: when they checked into the hotel, and it comes back again here when they go back to the back room, the bouncer's like, "I need a major credit card." Simon is carrying Todd's credit card. Simon's a drug dealer, but Todd is Simon's drug dealer. So Rana normally buys drugs from Simon. She jumps over Simon, and I love the conversation earlier about the drug pecking order and the hierarchy of, you can't go around. You can't go to a dealer's dealer. That's like breaking the chain. So now Simon has Todd's credit card. So everywhere that he's checking stuff in, it's like under Todd's name. This will come back later. But so he gives the bouncer the credit card, and then they go back in the back room for this lap dance sequence. Also, brief point that I love to point out here, because you mentioned how James Duval and Breckin Meyer's characters were sidelined. I love them. They're great actors. But if you're going to pair Simon up with one of the group, you're going to put him with Taye Diggs, because is that not the most charming motherfucker of all time? Like Taye Diggs is a treasure, and everything that he's in, he's great. I still stand by and defend, and I'm going to get ridiculed for this here. I love him in, and I love the movie, the House on Haunted Hill remake. I don't care. It's a guilty pleasure. But anything Taye Diggs is in is just, even if it's a shit movie, Taye Diggs is amazing. So I love that he's the one that Simon gets paired off with, because it makes the night so much better. So they're in the champagne room getting this lap dance.
Well, and before that though, when they take the Guido's guy's car, in the glove compartment, they find a gun.
Yep, very important. Forgot about that. Good call.
And so
Simon's fascinated with this gun. He wants to be an American cowboy.
It's like he just,
because Simon's British. Yeah, that's right.
And so he just naturally is looking at it. He's curious, and of course he takes it into the strip club. So when he touches the strippers, which you are not supposed to do.
But of course he's going to, because he's Simon.
One of whom is the amazing J.E. Freeman, who was a wonderful character actor. Most memorably for me in Miller's Crossing, the Coen Brothers film.
That is my favorite Coen Brothers movie, so thank you for citing that one, because he's great in that. I love it. And it's like you have, like, between him and Fichtner, you get this sense of prestige to this movie, which kind of elevates it in a way. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And so Marcus and Simon, Simon shoots one of the bouncers, and they get out, but naturally they've left the Todd's credit card there, and so they go back to the hotel, try to get Breckenmeyer and James Duvall's characters out of the room before the bouncers come and get them. And the funniest thing is they have to bribe the next door room's kid to let them in through there so they can get out. And
oh god, and all the stuff with that kid is great.
Yeah. And they do manage to get out of Vegas and drive back to LA, but of course they left the credit card there, and that's going to come into play in the third story. To sum up this story, I really enjoyed it. I think this might be my favorite story. It's just it's the most entertaining, just on a consistent basis. Like it finds its tone and it just keeps hitting that moment, hitting that button and hitting that button. And
Oh yeah, no, you're
yeah,
totally right. In a weird way, it almost feels like if you're looking at all these vignettes, like yeah, they're all interconnected, but because this one actually is sort of like the road trip out of LA to Vegas, it almost feels like its own little short film in the middle of this other
yeah,
movie. And I don't think that's a bad thing. Like I don't
yeah,
mean it in a way like it feels disjointed, but like it sort of is like there's I think it works well as story number two because it does feel like a centerpiece.
yeah, yeah. I would agree with that because the third part we're going to bring it back to LA, and we're going to start by following Zach and Adam, and they're basically in the middle of a sting operation run by William Fitchner's character, to find their drug dealer, who in this case is supposed to be Simon, but ends up being Rona. And we already went through that scene but this time you kind of see it from their perspective instead of Rona's perspective, and it ends up the same way. Uh, what is it that why is it that Fitchner ends up taking them home to his wife, who's played by the amazing Jane Krakowski?
Yeah, no shit. Oh no, I guess I remember like he yeah, after they're like, hey, we're done, right? We did our part because they were busted. The whole thing is that they were Hollywood actors. They were busted for possession, and Fichtner like had them in. So like they're having them try to get this dealer, and they were trying to get Simon. Simon's out of town, so he's like, well, we're gonna get Rana. And he's like, well, what if it's her first time? Well, it's her first time dealing, or if she's dealing, she's a dealer. It doesn't matter if it's her first or last time. So they're like, but whatever happens, we did. Adam and Zach are like, we did our part, right? We're off the hook. So Fichtner's character is like, yeah. What was his? I totally forget his character. Burke. That's it. Burke is his character's name. So I'm gonna check IMDb there. So anyway, Fichtner Burke. He tells him, yeah, you're off the hook. I tell you what. It's Christmas and my wife made this dinner. Why don't you come over and have dinner with us because we both have to work. They had to work on Christmas, so they said they were gonna have Christmas dinner early. Why don't you come have Christmas dinner with me and then we'll sign the papers? And they're like, okay. So they find themselves suddenly at this this guy's house, and and everything gets weird. And I love like this is actually some of my favorite comedy in the movie, where the whole thing feels played out. Like you have these two actors, and I actually don't know that Fichtner knows that they're gay and that they're a
Yeah,
couple.
yeah,
I think that I don't believe that, if I remember right, I don't think that was ever like revealed to his character. So he has these two Hollywood actors over, and then they're sort of divided and conquered by Burke Fichtner and his wife, played by
yeah.
Jane Krakowski, and it just gets like really weird. Where
The
like
funniest part of this is the part that absolutely cracks me up is because at the dinner table you think they're setting up, because of the fact that you're
yeah
right, they don't really. You get the feeling that Burke doesn't realize they're gay,
yeah
and you think they're setting up the fact that these two are basically going to try to rope them into like an orgy.
Oh yeah, you think that they're baiting them for a foursome, like you think that they're swingers, that it's an open marriage, because Fichtner is with Jay Moore's character,
Yeah,
and in the bedroom, and Jay Moore comes out of the bathroom, and there's Fichtner butt ass naked, just saying, and he's like, here, smell this, and holds out his wrist. He's like, smells like CK1, right? But it's not. Here, try this. I get it way cheaper than I get the other stuff. And Jay Moore's just like, okay, your dick's out. What? And then, and then cross cut over to Scott Wolf's character, Adam, in the kitchen with Jane Krakowski, who's like bending over to get something out of the cabinet, and
yeah,
does like the stripper look at my ass stand up, like, oh, I didn't see you there. And then she's just making this awkward erotic eye contact with him while she's like doing the most terrible job. If like I don't know if you noticed this, but like I was cracking up this time, like where she's like like using egg beaters on like cookie batter, or like
yeah,
she's making
yeah.
something in a mixing bowl and she's mixing it, and it's all like mixed up around the beaters and nothing is happening, and she's just like doing a terrible job of cooking but just staring at him, and he's super uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And then like I love that moment where they all four are finally, oh, we're in the same room, because like Fichtner and Jay Moore's character come in and they're like, oh, should we do the red or the white wine? And Jane Krakowski goes, I don't know, what goes with ham? And then both Scott Wolf and Jay Moore at the same time go, white. It's just like, and then cut to them sitting down at the dinner table. So you think that this is all set up for like this giant foursome between like the husband and wife that are like, we're gonna bring this new these two guys in, and it's gonna get weird. And in a weird way, you're kind of like, this movie's gonna go there. Cool, it's fine. Yeah, I was like, if the story went there, I was fine with it. But then it takes a left turn.
And it's the fact that it's because of how well the Fichtner and Krakowski sell it.
Their performances are amazing.
So terrific in this movie. And you just get this feeling, oh my God, they completely sell this. So if they go there, it wouldn't surprise me at all.
Yeah.
The place, but oh my God, the place they go to instead, and the fact that they're everything, it basically, they're trying to sell them on an MLM.
Exactly. They're like, it's Confederated Products, and Jay Moore's like, he's like, well, we recruit people, and we're the number one distributor in the area, and fingers crossed. I mean, number 3, and fingers crossed by March we might be number 2. And then Jay Moore's like, wait, you want us to sell Amway? And then Fichtner with like acting his ass off is like, it's Confederated Products. It's a different way of life. It's a different quality of product, or whatever he says, and it is so good. And then they walk out, and I remember, okay, that was kind of funny. Like when I was in my teens and I saw this, that shit was hilarious to me now as an adult. That joke aged much better over time for me. But yeah, it's so like where that goes, and that's really just the start of the story, because you think that the whole thing is going to be that dinner party, but then they leave, and well, I'll let you take it from there, because shit gets dark and weird at that point. Oh no, wait, what's the next thing? They're at the liquor store next, and they both realize, because they're okay. Sorry, I'm getting excited.
No,
I really this movie is a lot of fun. Like, but I forgot that the whole conversation that's been going back and forth with them is you can tell that they're a couple, that they're a gay couple, but there's been all this like conversation back and forth. It's been like these little like snipes and jabs they've been taking at each other about like what was it when they were in the car doing recon watching Rana earlier? They're in the car, and Fichtner asked something to Jay Moore. It's like, so you have a girlfriend? He's like, oh yeah, I totally got a girlfriend, and it's like, is she faithful? No, I don't think so. Are you faithful to her? Not anymore, no. And then like Scott Wolf is like, well, you haven't been faithful to her. He's like, yeah, but only after I found out she was cheating. And there's kind of these looks, and right there you're like, oh, okay. And then they're in the store, and then they pass Katie Holmes, and Katie Holmes is like, gay men are so hot. So then you're like, like, oh, okay, I get it. They're a couple. I mean, you come on, you were kind of already there before, but then they had what was the next thing that happened? Oh, okay, so there's been all these little back and forths about how that they're a couple, but someone was unfaithful. And then they're at this liquor store, and this comes out, and they're like talking about it. Like, okay, well, who was it? Oh, you just want to know. And then we find out that they both had been cheating on each other with the same person. Was it Jimmy from wardrobe or makeup or something?
Something.
But like one of the guys on set. So now they out to sort of confront Jimmy as sort of a ha-ha moment for both of them. And then they find him at this same rave that Sarah Polley was at the beginning of the movie. And it's all kind of starting to come full circle.
Mm-hmm.
And go ahead.
And so we find out that, so the reason that Rona ends up in a ditch is because she is accidentally run over. And this is where we find out that she is actually accidentally run over by Zach and Adam,
yeah.
And it's just them going back and forth about it is, and
their reaction, like, because okay, in Rana's story, when she gets hit, like it's really terrifying. You're like, oh fuck, and then the car just backs up, goes forward, kicks her down a ditch, backs up. Timothy Olyphant is like, what the hell? And then the car drives off, and it feels kind of dark and menacing.
Yeah.
But then when you see it from their perspective, they're in the car freaking out like, oh my God, we hit someone. And then they see Timothy Olyphant like motioning like, what the fuck, with a gun. And they're like, he's got a gun. Go, go, go. And then they drive off and go to the gas station. And of course, Scott Wolf's character finds out that, and this is a little bit of logic. I'm like, but at the time, it went over my head. And there could be some loophole here that I'm just not understanding technologically. But I think that, so Scott Wolf, he freaks out and he realizes that he still has the wire, the mic that the cops put on him, like taped to him. He didn't give it back. So then he talks to, he goes up and shows Jay Moore, and he's like, shh, don't say anything. So they throw it away, and he's like, well, they weren't listening. He's like, no, it's all on tape somewhere. They could have been recording it and hear it later. So they think that there's evidence of them talking about how they hit and killed this girl. Yeah. And all I'm thinking is, range, man. That wireless mic ain't like you're if you're more than a fucking parking lot away, that's not gonna pick up. No. But of course they're paranoid. They're freaking out. Yeah. Part of me now is like, come on, you guys work in movies. You've had lav mics attached to you. You know that wouldn't have recorded unless it's some super powerful thing. And I could be wrong on this, but I would be shocked to learn that a mic would record from that far away where they were across town. But anyway, they so they go back and they decide that, okay, well, the thing to rectify the situation is we have to go get rid of the body, because if there's no body, no crime. They go back, they find Rana in the ditch. And then there is Rana laying in the ditch, and they realize that she's still alive. So there's this beautiful moment of comedy to me where Jay Moore is like, actually, no, there are two. I don't remember what order they came in. I'm probably messing this up. And I remember like one whenever Jay Moore's thinking, well, we have to kill her now because we were thinking she was dead to hide the body. So he grabs like a club and is ready to club her over the head. And he's like, okay, new plan. Oh, no, okay, yeah, that came after. That cracked me up. But also the little bit where Scott Wolf is in the trunk kind of trying to make room for a body that they're about to go get. And Jay Moore's like, stop. And he's like, what? He goes, it's a Miata. And he's trying to like clear room in this like little lunchbox sized trunk for a body. Where I love movies about people trying to deal with a crime that are just, so inept. And it's like, this is how you get caught. Anyway, so like they decide to throw Rana's body on a car that sets the alarm go off, and other people like go and they call the ambulance and like, oh, she's going to be okay, because they realize she's alive. So is that the end of their story? I think that kind of wraps up the Adam and Zach
story, because it then goes to Rona in the hospital, and
waking up,
of the hospital,
which I like to think is like a prologue to Dawn of the Dead, that she woke up in the hospital and decided, I want to be a nurse, and changed her character path. But that's just anyway.
So she gets out of the hospital, and I can't remember did she go see?
She wakes up at the hospital, and then the next time we see her is at the grocery store when she comes limping in, because from there I think it goes to Katie Holmes, if I remember right, because we have Claire. Claire is like, she's still at the party, and Rana's gone.
Todd, and that's how they end up end up at the restaurant together.
Yeah, she walks home from the party. Yeah, she walks back from the party because she was waiting by Rana's car. Well, she didn't know Rana was carted out because she was still in the party. So Claire walks back to town, stumbles into a diner, and sees Todd sitting there, and is like, "Oh, hey, you!" Because we kind of briefly touched on it, but like there was this whole substantial bit where for the pills, like you were saying, Rana left Claire as collateral with Todd. So she had to hang out for most of the night there. So that's why she recognized him. So anyway, Claire like talks to Todd. You realize that that's the opening scene. Cut through, they're hot and heavy making out on the stairs. And, things are going to happen. But then I'm going to spin back around after we're done talking about the plot, because we totally glazed over my favorite scene in the whole movie. Okay, so then Todd's cat comes running down the stairs. He's like, hey, how'd you get out? At the top of the stairs, there is the bouncer and the owner of the strip club, the Crazy Horse from Vegas, that have tracked it, and they've tracked it down because they had Todd's credit card. Yeah. after the whole car chase and car wreck that happened when Simon and Marcus and all them were leaving town and leaving Vegas, like, oh, we don't talk about anything. Well, so Todd's given directions to the strip club owner about oh, this is how you find Simon, and traffic's really bad, you may want to take, you know, this which I thought was the funniest thing. He's like oh, thank you, that's really considerate. And then out of the blue, Simon comes bursting into the room. Todd, I need a place to lay low. And it's like everything, just the shit hits the fan.
And Claire ends up leaving, and you hear this shot. And
well, yeah, but that was after. Okay, so Todd, like Simon is like, you know, they're getting ready to shoot him in the head, and Claire is like, hello, witnesses, you can't do this, and she's like, well, what is it you really want? And the owner goes, justice. So then cut to Simon drawing an X with a magic marker on his bicep so that the strip club owner's son, the bouncer who got shot by Simon, can get a retribution shot. And then the owner, the son can't do it. He's like, I can't do it. It's different if he knows he's going to be shot. Simon's like, well, don't mind, really. It's okay. He's like, see, he doesn't mind. So then Katie's like, I'm out of here. So Claire leaves, and then the gunshot, and you hear just Simon, I'm all right. And then we're back to the supermarket.
Yeah.
And we see poor Rana just limping in, looking like, it's like when she comes walking in, I was just thinking, have you ever had such a shit day and you still had to go to work the next day from the night before? And she's just like limping in, barely together, like, I'm here for my shift because I got to make my $380 for my incredibly affordable apartment.
Yeah.
But anyway, she like, yeah, they talk, and then they realize, where's Manny? And we haven't really talked about Manny, and I really want to talk about Manny. But Manny, at the end of the scene, he was the third friend, the one with the Christmas lights car that was with Claire and Rana for Rana's story, and he took 2 of the tabs of ecstasy that Todd gave, and Todd warned. He said, "This is not that this is pharmaceutical grade shit. This isn't that, you know, like crunchy herbal rave shit." I think is the quote. And he said, so he's like, only 1 tab, don't take 2. Well, Manny takes 2. He steals 2 pills from Rana and pops them in. So he's tripping balls the whole time, and he's starting to freak out when they're running. When in Rana's story, when she sees Todd in the club looking for her, so he freaks out, and she makes him a little nest underneath some makeshift like aluminum siding and boxes, like a hobo, and makes him a little cubby hole so he can hide. And she's like, I'll come back for you later, and then completely forgets about him. So at the end of the movie, Claire's like, they're at the grocery store, and Claire's like, where's Manny? And Rana's like, oh, fuck. So they go looking for him, and they find him in the alley, still in his area, looking terrible. And my favorite credit in the movie is that alley cat that runs by him is played by, according to IMDb, Princess Leah Lucky Buttons. She's a good acting cat. She's a beautiful cat. So this cat runs by, and Manny wakes up looking like he's been hit by 1,000 Mack trucks. And Rana grabs him, and Manny looks at Rana and goes, you look like shit, which I think is hilarious coming from him.
Yeah.
And of course, then they go and they find the keys for Rana's car because they were lost. And then after she got hit, and then they drive away. And as they're driving away, we set this up. Manny, after the worst night ever, leans forward and is like, so what are we doing for New Year's? Which is the perfect ending to the movie. Yeah. So yeah, that's essentially Go in a nutshell. But which I love, and like I want to hear general thoughts and anything, but I've got to talk for a minute because we totally glazed over Manny, and Manny is one of my favorite parts of the movie because he has the 2 funniest scenes for me in the film. Now I agree, there's some hilarious comedy, like specifically like the "It's a Miata" and all the stuff with Adam and Zach, and everything with Fichtner and Krakowski's character where they think that they're about to get into like some like weird open marriage gangbang, and then all the stuff in Vegas, which is utter hilarity. But there's these 2 little moments with Manny which are like my favorites, and the first one is when the ecstasy's kicking in and he's tripping out, and they go back to the grocery store. The reason they go to the grocery store is, in Rana's story, is because she realizes, since she had to flush the drugs after, the encounter with Fichtner and Adam and Zach, she's like, well, I need to give these pills back to Todd and see if I can get my money back. So she gets all these like allergy medicines and baby aspirin, and puts them in the tap, and then she takes the extra and then goes back to the rave to sell them to people, telling them, you should take this with a lot of pot, because they're just taking allergy medicine and chewable aspirin that's going to do nothing. But these ravers are like, oh, again, this placebo effect. They're like, oh, this is great. I totally feel it, man. It's like the world's falling from underneath you and whatever. But so she's in the supermarket getting all these like replacement drugs to try to con over and fuck over this drug dealer. And here's Manny watching the checkout girl. Every time she's scanning something, it's going beep, and he's just in the background at an empty register, just putting his hands over, going beep, like, you know, kind of like trying to mirror the sounds.
Yeah.
And then he has this hallucination sequence set to Macarena, where it's her and him, the cashier and him dancing, and she's feeding him bananas, and he's just like thinking they're having this grand dance sequence, and then it cuts back and he's just going beep, just like kind of putting his hands over the scanner to make that sound. Like, that is comedy gold to me.
Yeah.
But that's the second tier, because the best scene for me is whenever it's still in Rana's story, when they go to Todd's house and she's like trying to exchange the drugs, and Manny is standing there, and all of a sudden Todd's cat that we referenced, that we talked about at the end, that he comes back, the cat jumps up on the back of the couch and just stares at him, and there's this uncomfortable, like, he's drugged out of his mind staring at this cat. And this is important. They were playing, you said that it started with the supermarket scene. The game that they were playing, the three, Claire, Manny, and Rana were playing in the back, is this game called Dead Celebrities, where someone says the name of a dead celebrity, and whatever, like, if you, like, for instance, said like John Wayne, the next person would have to say a name that started with W, you know? Mm-hmm. So like they were doing this back and forth, and there was this whole thing where Rana said Malcolm X, and Claire's like, you can't do that. No one starts with, she's like, no one starts. It took me a minute to like, yeah, but then you're like, oh, this is a simple game. She's like, nothing starts with X. And there was this whole joke about Manny said, Xerxes, some famous pharaoh guy, starts with X. He could have saved your ass. And so and the cat jumps up and all of a sudden goes into subtitles, and the subtitle in the cat says, I can hear your thoughts, and Manny is looking like he's freaking out. And then they have this whole back and forth about, like, and he says the name of this like some dynasty, like a Chinese ruler or something, and it starts with X, and then Manny corrects him and says no, and it says that the name doesn't start with an X. I would be remiss to try to pronounce it, so I shouldn't. But he says, but he says no, instead of an X, the name starts with a C. And he goes, that's wrong, and he corrects him. And then the cat says, you are going to die. And then there's just this panic look on Manny, and like, I remember, I should have gone back and revisited, but like I said, I was pretty obsessed with this movie back in the day, and I remember something on the commentary. I think it was Doug Liman's commentary. If it wasn't him, it was another crew member, but they were talking about that sequence that I think they sent over to like one of the associate editors or an intern that came up with the way, because they couldn't figure out how to get out of that sequence, because all of a sudden in that sequence, no one else is in the room, not Rana, not Claire, not Todd. And they're having this guy, and so like it's this quick little like montage to come out of that drug hallucination sequence. And I for some reason that sequence kills me, partially because like I love cats and I think that it's hilarious, but like it was just, I don't know. I love the Manny moments. I think that he brings a lot of unique comedy to the film, and also I guess touching on that, the editing in this movie is great, man. It's really, really well cut. I mean, it's well shot too. Like I kind of forgot that Doug Liman shot the movie himself, and it's photographed really well.
Yeah, and you really start to see, because his next film after this was The Bourne Identity, and you really see.
Was that the next? Yeah, that was the next one. You're right.
You really see the energy that he brings to this one come into fruition with Bourne Identity, and the way he shoots that and cuts it, and just the pacing and the ability to keep the movie going. And that is one of the things that's really great about this, is because of the fact that it doesn't linger. Like, and when it does linger on certain scenes, it's for a purpose, whether it's comedic, whether it's for the nature of the story, and whether it's to build up tension. And that's one of the things that's really Liman is kind of like, like he really hasn't he hasn't really been sort of top tier level filmmaker. I mean, I think the most recent one they did that like people really got excited about was Edge of Tomorrow.
Yeah,
Um,
which is amazing and
yeah,
incredibly underrated. That movie
yeah,
deserved to be way more successful than it was.
yeah,
Um,
and
but yeah, like I don't know. I'm trying to think. Actually, you know what? I really liked Edge of Tomorrow, but I'm gonna go like I really like American Made.
oh wow, I
You
forgot
remember? You
about
remember?
that.
Remember that Tom Cruise movie, the one that's like based on a true
Oh
story?
yeah,
Like that.
that's right. I
I thought
forgot they did
I
that.
yeah, and I just now until I looked, I like actually I feel bad. Like I forgot that he directed that, but like he sort of let's see, he did well, okay, yeah. So had Swingers, then Go, then Born Identity, then Mr. and Mrs. Smith, which was a pretty big
Yeah,
success,
yeah,
and then Jumper and Fair Game. Like it started to go down. Like I don't think he achieved quite as much with those. But then Edge of Tomorrow, which I guess, and I'm looking at IMDb. I guess are they actually doing a sequel, like Live, Die, Repeat, and Repeat? I know that they've long talked about doing a sequel to that one, which they
I
totally
wasn't
should.
sure that one was in production yet, but I mean, obviously not much is in production right now.
Yeah, right now,
But
but
yeah, I mean, yeah, it's one of those things that's been talked about, but I mean, I'm not sure like how far along it is. So
yeah, but I always remember like thinking like Doug Liman was always a pretty exciting filmmaker for me. Like anytime
yeah,
he had something new coming out, I was really excited about it. I yeah, I think that like you have American Made. I thought was really slickly well done. Again, I feel bad. Like I completely forgot that he did that one, but that one was great. But Edge of Tomorrow felt like the probably the biggest movie that he did. I mean, Mr.
yeah,
and Mrs. Smith was pretty big, but Edge of Tomorrow felt like oh, it was a big picture.
hmm
But I don't know, but they always just like you go back to even Swingers and Go, like they have this energy and this like fervent immediacy
yeah,
that I think is kind of like pretty consistent in most of his work. Born Identity, like I think he graduated to a certain level of patience and how like he built character and story. Like that movie feels a lot. While the action is immediate and that like the visuals are very
hmm
like visceral and consistently like vigorous,
yeah,
it's it's a little more patient. Where like Swingers and Go feel like movies like you've had just a little too much like you're either on off or on too much of your meds or you just like you just had the right amount of drugs that you're like come on we gotta go right now we gotta go like they always have like this really I don't know they almost feel like a little like rabid and impatient but
right,
in a good way like it works for those films
hmm
um
yeah,
but like but I always think like Lyman is like a really I always thought he's like a really smart director.
yeah. No, and I think he does a great job in building comedy. He understands the rhythms of comedy as well as the rhythms of action sequences, and I think that's one of the things that's really benefited him in movies like the Bourne movies, like Mr. and Mrs. Smith. I mean, even here with Go, where the comedy lands in this movie, and it's like it doesn't. If it doesn't land in this movie, it's not going to be. This movie is not going to be as entertaining as it is. And
Oh no, absolutely.
he understands how to. He figures out how to get out of situations, and I mean, part of that is August's script as well. It's like he's got
Yeah,
really good blueprint in August's script, and so yeah,
yeah, but
this is a really good. This is if you haven't seen it in a while, or this is sort of a blind spot in your Doug Liman watching, definitely go back and watch it. I think I know it's on the Stars app right now, which is how I ended up watching it. But yeah,
yeah,
I really enjoy it.
I highly recommend it too. Like I think it's one that actually holds up. Like I said, in some ways it does feel a little dated and it feels like a time capsule movie because like, you're like, oh well, that's not how party culture kids are today,
Yeah,
or and the music like it feels like a really good snapshot of like things that were good and indicative of the time because like yeah it's paced really well it's smart it's clever it's funny the
hmm
characters are sharp the dialogue is razor sharp I think you know, the cinematography is great. The use of editing and sound design. Stephen Marion's editing is phenomenal, but also just the way that they use sound design to kind of like put you into like the drug-induced states and little moments, I think are very, very clever. It's very immersive. It's dark and it's funny. I love how it just sort of, you're having fun and then you're like, oh shit, this is like it messes with you on kind of a fun level, which feels like you're having fun with your friends and then something really shitty happens and it's sobering. Like, so like it feels very immersive and appropriate. I do think that actually I forgot how much I love the soundtrack in this movie. The score is by BT and Moby, who were sort of like the it people at the time as far as electronic music. But all the needle drops, like I love the No Doubt tracks in this, and you know, like this is probably my favorite use of Magic Carpet Ride in the in the Vegas sequence. Which has been used in a ton of movies, but it's just it's a good party movie. It's a fun movie to watch with your friends. There was a really funny comment that Emily made when we finished watching it, and because I was like, I kept forgetting until they talked about Christmas. I'm like, oh yeah, this movie takes place at Christmas. I need to remember this is a Christmas movie. She's like, oh, and it's all these little vignette stories, so it's like Love Actually. And I correct her. I go, no, this is the better Love Actually, because I'm sorry, I hate Love Actually. I know everybody loves that movie. I think it's crap. I don't like it, but I like the actors in it, but I just don't like that movie. But I thought that was funny when she's like, it's Love Actually. I'm like, it's the better Love Actually is what you meant. So go, the better Love Actually. You should absolutely watch it.
I don't even know how I could argue with that. And we hadn't really talked about the soundtrack, but yeah, the soundtrack here by BT and Moby is really entertaining and is really good, and it really helps set the tone pretty immediately, and it maintains that tone, and it's like that's one of the things I also appreciate about Liman, whether it's in this or whether it's in Swingers, where it's like he understands the ways of using sort of genres of music to get to an effect or get to as a way of storytelling.
He did it with Swingers, and I mean, oh yeah, some of the needle drops in the Bourne movie, the Bourne Identity. Yeah. He's really clever with music, I think.
But I really enjoyed this one. I'm glad I got a chance to revisit it, and I'm glad we finally were able to get to it, and I really enjoyed this conversation.
Oh, me too. Thanks, man. No, it was really good to take a trip down memory lane and revisit this and chat about it. So thanks for that.
I'd like to thank Jacob for joining me on the podcast for Go. It's always really great to talk to him, and I look forward to doing so again in the future. My hope going into 2021 is to get the rest of the Class of 1999 podcast recorded, and hopefully I might be able to fit one more in before the new year, but we'll see. That's it for this time for the Sonic Cinema podcast. Thank you very much for joining me at wherever you're listening to this, whether it's Apple, Google, or Spotify, or even Podbean. I know we're on there. And or at the Sonic Cinema podcast YouTube channel. And thank you very much. This is Brian Scuttle saying so long for the Sonic Cinema podcast at www.sonic-cinema.com.